Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising trilogy, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again. Each book is a compilation of features about cruisers and cruise and travel personalities from around the world. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, I am delighted to welcome Marcus Adams of the website Sparkx. Marcus is a 30-something leading UK-based blogger and travel writer who is passionate about cruising. Marcus is a sought-after cruise expert, and he writes for and contributes to several publications and websites in the UK and the US, such as Porthole Cruise Magazine, Huffington Post, The Telegraph, Daily Mail, and CNN. Marcus has also been a featured contributor for Cruise International magazine, specializing in LGBTQ travel. I featured Marcus in the Joy of Cruising in a section called Cruising's Young and Restless, which focused on up-and-coming millennials making their mark in cruising. Marcus is still doing great things in cruising, and it is good to chat with him again. Welcome, Marcus, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Hi, Paul. How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Very well.
Good. So I've been following the Sparkx blog, and I see that you've been on some magical cruises in the last several months. I think I saw Disney Wish, Disney Cruise Line's first new ship in 10 years, Celebrity Beyond, perhaps my new favorite ship. I sailed that in the Med in October. And then Enchanted Princess and Discovery Princess from Princess Cruises. So give us your impressions of those wonderful ships.
Yeah, I mean, where do we start? As I say, they've all been really wonderful cruise ships, and itineraries as well, I should say. I mean, I agree with you. Celebrity Beyond is a fantastic ship. I've sailed on her 4 times over the past year. So I was on the inaugural from Southampton in April last year, and I was also at the naming ceremony in November. And, she truly is, a boutique resort at sea, that embodies that modern luxury vibe, that has something for everyone. But what I really like about Beyond is that Celebrity took the success of Edge. So, Edge in itself is an amazing ship. And they've just continued to evolve it. They've enlarged the spaces, they've added new exciting venues and some brilliant new entertainment. And I don't know about you when you spent time on board, but my particular favorite was the enlarged Grand Plaza, that real heart of the ship with the iconic martini bar right in the center where all the activity took place. And then you're right. I mean, Disney Wish, the first ship for a number of years, the Disney. And really, they just continued to do what they do well. They just took that successful design of the previous ships and added a bit of pixie dust to it, with a number of new firsts at sea. So things like the Aquamouse, which is the first aqua coaster at sea. And, it's so much fun to try out. And I think she's a great ship to spend a few days on. Once you spend a few days in the Orlando parks, hop on to Port Canaveral, go on Disney Wish and spend some time with the Bahamas. And then you're also right. So I've just come back from Discovery Princess, actually. I've been on both Discovery and Enchanted over the past year. They're both the newest Princess ships in the fleet. So, they really do ooze that signature love boat flair. And one thing that I found really exciting on both these ships, and it is brand new, is it's called 360, and it's a new specialty dining restaurant. And honestly, it's like none I've experienced at sea. So it features things like an immersive story with sights, textures, sounds, and even smells of the Mediterranean. It's really quite exciting.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. It's something else. But obviously it's all kind of matched with high quality, locally sourced ingredients. So it's kind of the whole experience is quite very cool. So, just as a quick example, some of the wine that we tasted, it comes from the Mediterranean, but it's actually aged in the sea. So the rocking motion of the sea gives it this really unique flavor that's matched with the European dishes. So it's really, really cool. So yeah, I mean, yeah, can't beat it.
I've been on just about every major cruise line that leaves out of the U.S. except Princess Cruises. So I know I need to go on that soon. Which one would you recommend between Enchanted Princess and Discovery Princess?
I would say because they're very much the same ship, like not totally identical, but they're very similar. I would say use the destination as your
Hmm.
gauge. So
Okay.
obviously, Enchanted Princess, summers in the Med and winters in the Caribbean, whereas Discovery Princess is mostly out of LA and Alaska. So
Hmm.
it depends whatever you want to get out of the cruise.
Hmm.
I think personally, particularly with what I said about 360, doing Enchanted Princess around the Med as you're sailing around the Med would be quite exciting. So that would
Hmm.
probably be my pick.
Yeah, the only ship of those four grand ships that you just talked about, the only one I've been on is Beyond, and I loved it. Did you, when you were on Beyond, did you get to try Le Voyage?
I did in January and it was superb. Like the food was so
Yeah.
good. I mean, I'm very much a big foodie. Like when I go on cruise ships, I'm all about the food. And yeah, I absolutely love Le Voyage.
Yeah, as I am. I have mentioned on a couple of celebrity cruise groups on Facebook that my meal at Le Voyage was the best I ever had. Not on sea. I'm saying anywhere.
But
So.
But I think this is a really interesting point and something I talk about a lot in my blog is the incredible food and cuisine and the
Hmm.
level and the scale at which they do that is
Hmm.
something that people just don't appreciate when they've not been on a cruise before. And it's something that I continually try and like push out there. Like the food is amazing on cruising.
Hmm. So those are four great ships. Did I miss any that you sailed in 22 or 23?
It has been a busy couple of years. Yes, there's been a couple more. So I've also sailed on Virgin Voyages a few times. So I've been on Valiant Lady a couple of times. Yeah, yeah. So a year ago, I was sailing out the UK on Valiant Lady, and I also did Valiant out of Miami in January. So Virgin has such a different take on cruising, and it was great for me to experience it in Florida and the Bahamas, like really getting to see the true Virgin experience, as I would call it. And things like the Bimini Beach Resort, like it kind of like I can kind of see. I really like Virgin as a brand, but also, and
You know,
sorry, go for it.
I was just gonna say, Virgin is the other line besides Princess that I haven't tried, and I haven't booked any cruises yet for 24, and I'm pretty sure that I'm gonna try a Virgin in 24. You know, when it first was announced a couple of years ago, when Virgin Voyages was first announced, I wasn't exactly feeling it because they didn't have buffets and they didn't have kids and most
Yep.
most of the time I cruise. I do cruise with my granddaughter, so that made me take some pause. And then the part about
Yeah.
buffets also made me take some pause because I love buffets. That kind of drew me to cruising. But I'll be honest with you, after the pandemic, I'm not nearly as big on buffets as I used to be. So I definitely want to go on voyage or Virgin Voyage.
Yeah. And I would say it's probably going to be a theme of what I'm talking about on this, but food again, the food on Virgin is out of this world. Like every single restaurant on board produces incredible
So
food.
so talk about that. I guess you just choose different restaurants to go to, right? I understand there's no
Yeah,
main
yeah, because
dining
it's
room.
all included. Yeah, so there's no specialty restaurants on Virgin. What they have is a lot of smaller, more intimate restaurants, but that can range from, there is the steak restaurant, which is known as the Wake. Fabulous steaks, fabulous seafood. If you're into that, they have an Italian on board. An elevated Mexican, which is something you don't get on most cruise ships. I'm a big Mexican food
Hmm.
fan, and you don't get like an elevated Mexican, so that's fantastic as
Hmm.
well. Um, they've got a Korean barbecue on board. That's amazing. And the other one, which is quite interesting, it's called Test Kitchen. It's kind of that molecular gastronomy, so it's kind of you never quite know what you're going to get next. But it's all included, and I think that's actually something that I hands off to Virgin. That is really really good to include that in the cruise
Yeah,
fare.
test kitchen sounds intriguing. Sounds a little bit like I'm sure you've been, or have you been to any of the Wonderland restaurants on Royal Caribbean?
Yes, yeah, it's very
Uh-huh.
very similar, but it's more thematically, it's more like a laboratory. So it's all kind of set up as if you're like in a laboratory and you're kind of like doing that. Yeah, it's fun. I've been a few times, and every time it's good. I would say the thing about Virgin is I've been on Virgin 4 times now, and every time I go on, they're evolving it and they're developing it, and there's something there. They've got something there. It's a really, really interesting brand to watch out for.
So anything else in the last year or so?
Yeah.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hello, nerds. Come listen to the History Nerds United podcast, and let's make history fun again. We interview today's best authors, whether they are established Pulitzer Prize winners or someone debuting their first book. Let us show you that history is not a boring class you took in high school, but a place where the best stories come from. And we don't just cover history. We also love to chat about true crime, biographies, memoirs, and so much more. So head on over to History Nerds United and let us introduce you to your new favorite book and learn the story behind the story.
History Nerds United.
So the other thing is, and you know this, I'm a big fan of river cruising. So last year we had the opportunity to sail with Avalon Waterways along the Danube. And one thing that Avalon does, which I'm really a big fan of, is they have these cruises called active and discovery cruises. So it's much more being active, but also more immersive. So things like, I mean, we did everything from hiking, cycling, immersing yourself in a culture, going to the sites, the food, obviously, to the Danube. Sometimes you're doing like all of those in a day and it's quite exhausting, but it's actually quite enriching. So that was an absolutely fabulous experience. And, you know, for me, it showcased why river cruising is one of those things that people should watch out for. It's a great way to kind of, I always say it's a great way to city hop. Like if you love a city break, it's like that consecutive kind of way of seeing the world, and I absolutely love it.
Now, was that your first river cruise?
No, I don't know how many I've been on. I've done quite a few. That was my second Avalon, and that was very good. I've been on Viking, I've been on Emma Waterways. In the UK, I've been on the TUI brand as well. So it's I think it's something that everyone should have a look at in the future. But it's very different from ocean.
River cruising is on my bucket list. I haven't had one. I know in the first book, the one that you were in, I got a lot of feedback after that book about river cruising and small ship cruising. So I tried to bolster that in the second book, Cruising Interrupted. So I had a number of small ship cruise personalities like Corky Cruise and folks like that. And then in the new book that just came out literally this weekend, The Joy of Cruising Again, spending a lot of time on small ship cruising. So yeah, I definitely want to go on a river cruise. So any other cruises before I get back to your website?
I can't remember. I don't think so. I think that is it. Which is, it's a good mix. I'm quite happy.
That's enough. It sounds like you've been cruising nonstop.
I know.
So tell our listeners about yourself and about Sparkx.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the headline is I've been cruising for 30 years. In fact, it was 30 years ago last week that I went on my first cruise. So I always say it's very much like part of my DNA. Like I've loved cruising since I was very, very young. I used to go on them with my parents all the time. And it's always been like, I can't remember a time that hasn't kind of been like a passion of mine. But also I live in Winchester in the UK, which is only a stone's throw from Southampton. So literally, I can just go down 15 minutes down the road and I can see the ship. So I can just hop on a ship. So it's very convenient for me. It's kind of like, it's always there. I can never get away from it. Yeah.
When you said you've been cruising 30 years, I'm thinking to myself, get out.
I think that too.
Your relative youth versus me, because I've been cruising 30 years.
Yeah.
But now I remember in The Joy of Cruising, I actually have a photo of you with your mom, and you were cruising as a little kid. So yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. 30 years ago. Yeah. So it's but yeah, it's always been there, and I kind of something that I've always been passionate about. So I mean, Sparkx really is kind of an evolution of that thought process. I wanted for a very long time to use that passion to kind of highlight to people why they should choose to cruise. And it was only in 2015 that I kind of decided, well, why am I not doing it? So I created the website and I started to get more actively involved with the industry, like developing relationships with the lines, and obviously going on cruising as a consumer. First and foremost, I'm a consumer and I enjoy going on cruises, but really all to try and like promote cruising. And I think the key thing, and this is kind of the heartfelt moment, is that so I've been caring for my father who had Alzheimer's for a number of years, and he passed away in 2014. So for me, the blog was, and it continues to be, an outlet for me to put positivity into the world. So I often say, and I say this on my blog, it's a love letter to both my parents who I've lost at the ultimate, at the end of the day. So
very nice.
Yeah.
Now, if I can ask, what's behind the name Sparkx?
It's very simple. It was my nickname at school. It was 2015. I couldn't think of anything better at the time, and I just thought, just go with my nickname. So that's all it is. Often thought about rebranding it and changing it, but I've never quite found something that I actually resonate with as much.
It's been 5 years or so since we chatted at length. I keep up with you on social media, and you have become quite the cruise influencer. Talk about what's been happening with Sparkx, other than that 1.5 year interruption due to COVID, since I spoke to you for the Joy of Cruising.
Yeah, so I mean, where do we start? I think for me, as I say, my passion, my blog is, for me, I try and show the experiential side of cruising. Like, it's not just about the ship. It's kind of like that link with the destination, kind of showing like, why you should choose to cruise. But I think for me, and I guess I'm slightly different from a lot of the bloggers in that my focus is on written word and visuals. I love creating that kind of narrative and kind of like showcasing it that way. And, I really love working with the cruise lines. They're such an amazing group of people. And really working together with my fellow bloggers, obviously yourself and many people, to just showcase what there is to love about cruising. And I hope we all bring something different, and I hope I do bring something different to the blogging sphere that people can kind of resonate with. But since we last spoke and since the pandemic, I've continued to evolve and mature this approach. And in addition to the website, I do write for a number of cruise and other publications. So I do a lot of third-party stuff, which I take as much enjoyment from. And in addition to this, I love to spend time curating my Instagram. I'm a perfectionist, so it gives me great joy to spend many, many hours looking at my Instagram to try and continue to develop it. And I guess the other key foundation of my blog has been around promoting and supporting cruising as a great and safe way for LGBTQI plus travelers to experience the world. And it's something, I write about quite a lot of that. It's something I'm very passionate about as well.
Now on Instagram, you have great photos. Do you have a presence on YouTube?
I do have a YouTube channel. I have to admit, I don't use it very often. It's always been a question whether I should do it more. For me, it's not my natural skill set, which obviously I could learn, but it's not my natural skill set. I'm all about the photography. I'm all about written words. So it's kind of that. And I hope that's something different. I always say this, there's different content media to suit different people. And that's why blogging is such a brilliant thing, because there's so many wonderful people out there that can bring different things and resonate with different audiences.
Now, I alluded to it earlier. Don't like to spend too much time talking about it, but how did you spend your time during the lockdown? Did you do anything new and different? Grow a pandemic garden? Run a marathon? Take up bicycling? What did you do?
Well, I had to say my lockdown was pretty boring, but I mean, I'm lucky enough to have guns. So I did spend a lot of time out there, and where possible, and obviously within the various rules and guidelines of the time, I did get out into the countryside and enjoy it with my dog. I guess if you talk about a pandemic garden, it's probably here, in that I spent a lot of time building Lego during the pandemic, just to keep my mental health in shape. It's just something to kind of keep me busy. I think for me, and you mentioned earlier, is that one thing that I wanted to do and try and focus on in the pandemic and since is actually try and, live a healthier lifestyle. So I suffer from a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which creates a lot of complications, pain and injury and that kind of thing. So really coming out of the pandemic, I've really tried, fingers crossed, to manifest a positive lifestyle. I'm really trying, just, simple things, take care of myself. So that's kind of trying to turn something as awful as the pandemic into a positive for me.
Hmm. Now those figures on your shelf behind you, you say that's Lego?
Yeah,
Man, you're
that's all
good.
Lego.
You're good. Did
Yeah,
you?
it's it's about, I think I've lost track, about 15,000 pieces of Lego at this point.
Wow, they look good. Now,
And they
were you into that before the lockdown?
Yeah, I growing up, I loved Lego. And actually my day job is in planning. So it's kind of, yeah, so I've always loved Lego. And it was only during the pandemic, I was just like, I got so fed up of scrolling on websites and on social media and everything else. I just wanted to do something, but obviously there wasn't, what could you do? And I just suddenly thought, you know what? I'm going to start building it. And then it just got a bit out of hand, basically.
Hmm. So what was your first cruise back after cruising started up?
Yeah, so we were quite lucky in the UK, in that we were one of the first countries to start cruising in 2021. So in May 21, MSC started cruising, and they brought their brand new ship, MSC Virtuosa, to the UK. And I jumped straight on board, if I'm being brutally honest. And I have to say, and I don't know if you felt the same when you went back on your first cruise, but that moment of stepping back onto a ship was truly emotional. Like, it really, really hit you. And just, seeing the ships, having like been through the pandemic, come back to life with all the guests and the crew, that's the reason for me. It always be a memorable cruise for that reason.
Well, I've had more than a few cruisers, and I count myself in that group, who say on that first ship after the pandemic or after the lockdown, their eyes watered, and some
Me
did more
too.
than just watering. Some cried.
Yeah. I don't know if my eyes just watered thinking about it. So it's kind of
Hmm.
like,
Yep,
yeah.
yep. Now that first ship on the Virtuoso, I would say just about every cruiser that I have featured in the books in the UK was on that ship.
Yeah. We all literally, you couldn't stop us. Like, we were straight on it.
That that
Yeah.
that sounds wonderful. That
Yeah.
sounds
It
wonderful.
was, yeah, it was a celebration to
Hmm.
kind of show cruising is back. And I think,
Hmm.
it's
So,
brilliant.
say a little bit about Virtuoso. I'm curious because I'm going on MSC for the first time this year, the Meraviglia, and I assume Virtuoso
Yep.
is similar.
Very similar. Yeah, so I've been on both Bellissima and Virtuoso, which are the sisters to
Hmm.
Meraviglia. MSC is different in that it has that European flair,
Hmm.
and I think that's quite unique in its own way. So I think it's always quite exciting going on MSC's ship. They've got a lot of great restaurants on board, things like they've got a nice Mexican on board, and they do great sushi, teppanyaki, that kind of stuff. And also, because it's Italian, it's kind of, the decor is very different. It's got that chicness that you only find in Italy. So things like the Swarovski stairs that you'll find in the main atrium, they always say like every stair is like 8,000 euros and that kind of stuff, because it's just full of Swarovski's crystals. But yeah, it's a good ship, and I
Hmm.
think it was a good ship to go back on after the pandemic.
Hmm. Hmm. So what other ships did you get on right after the restart?
Well, I mean, this was an interesting, because in the UK, MSC were the only ones that were just taking testing and not vaccinations. So MSC initially was the only option for a lot of people.
Hmm.
So after that, I actually didn't have a cruise probably until August of that year, and I was on Scarlet Lady. So that was my second time on Scarlet Lady. That was a great cruise. And then the week after that, I was back on one of my absolute favorites, Celebrity Silhouette. So
Hmm.
we spent a week on board. Definitely with some tears of that one as well, because I love Silhouette. So it's nice to get back
Hmm.
onto Celebrity.
Hmm.
Yeah, it kind of built up from there. And I actually went,
Hmm.
actually in the following month after that, I went on Disney for the first time. So
Hmm. Hmm. What projects are you working on at the blog right now?
oh, that'd be a telling. But the blog continues to be a cornerstone of what I do. And as I said earlier, it continues to evolve year on year. So at the moment, I'm working on quite a few pieces. One is actually about the 30 years of cruising thing I mentioned just now, kind of like bringing it to life and kind of talking about it. For me, it's something I want to talk about is kind of how you, personally, how your cruise experience changes over the years. Like, how I
Hmm.
cruise now is very different to how I cruised a few years ago. And I'm kind of really interested in kind of looking into that space and kind of talking about that. But
Uh-huh.
on top of that, things like continuing, developing Celebrity Cruises content, Discovery Princess, I've got to talk about. Obviously, only just back from there. Some more stuff on Virgin Voyages, and I have to say, a lot of my focus at the moment is actually working on projects with third parties. So working with the cruise lines, various cruise media, travel agents, and other partners. I'm doing a lot of externally faced stuff at the moment. So I'm probably not giving enough time to the blog, if I'm being brutally honest. But there's only so much time in the day. Let's face it.
So how can our listeners follow Sparkx on social media and the web?
Yeah, so primarily the website is sparkx.org. If you go there, you can kind of find me. You can find everything about me. In terms of social media, on Twitter and on Facebook, it's Sparkx, and on Instagram and TikTok, it's Sparkx Explores.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the future. What do you have booked?
Yeah, so I've got a number of trips coming up at the moment. They're on the horizon and the works. There's nothing really substantial that's kind of in the works. So to be fair, being honest, obviously I've been on quite a few trips already this year. For the immediate future, I'm focusing probably on my job. I know it's such a boring answer, but there's a lot of exciting stuff coming. There are other things on the horizon. I'm just trying to work them out at the moment.
So what's on your bucket list? Cruising or life in general?
Cruising always. And it's a really hard question, but for me, I've always wanted to travel to Australia, Asia, and Japan. So for me, they would probably be next on my bucket list. And going back to what I just said, they may feature in some of those up-cruising cruises I'm working on. So that's, I'm looking into it, let's say. But, let's face it, there are so many cruises out there that I want to do. It's a never-ending list of things that I just want to do. Even going on the same itineraries, I just love being back on the ships, seeing new ships, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and new ships won't stop. I mean, it's just a flood of new ships coming along.
It's hard to keep up.
Yep. So Marcus, before we let you go, we're going to shift gears and talk about a couple of light or fun cruise questions, and then perhaps an oddball question. So, and this first one is kind of a standard question, but it helps me get some ideas. What's your favorite cruise drink and cruise food?
So I have to say I'm partial to a martini or two, maybe three. But actually, my absolute favorite drink on a cruise is called an Azteca, and it's found in the World Class Bar on Celebrity Cruises. What effectively it's a spicy take on a margarita, but it's absolutely delicious. I'm absolutely obsessed with them, quite frankly. In terms of a dish,
I love margaritas, and now I'm kicking myself that I didn't try that. My last two cruises have been on Celebrity. I mentioned the Beyond, and then I went on Millennium. I went on the what's called the Smooth Jazz Cruise. It was held on
Smooth Jazz,
Celebrity Millennium, and I missed that. I wish I had a conversation with you a few months ago.
It's out of this world, and I'm very fond of spicy food, so I asked them to take it up a notch or two, and it doesn't disappoint. It's very elevated. It's a very tasty drink. It's not just about the spice, and it's not just a margarita. It's actually a very tasty drink. It's made from jalapenos. It's got sherry in as well as the tequila. It's really, really good. In terms of a dish, I don't actually have a particular favorite dish, if I'm being honest. There's so much amazing food to enjoy on a cruise that, I'm about all of it. I mean, I did say to you earlier, I love Mexican food. So when a ship has a Mexican on board, I'm usually straight at the front of the queue. I mentioned on Virgin, they've got the elevated Pink Agave restaurant. That's absolutely fabulous. So, I mean, that would be my go-to, but, I love all of it.
I noticed on Meraviglia, they have a Mexican specialty restaurant. It doesn't sound like it's a really high-end specialty restaurant. It's called, I know I'm saying it wrong, Hola.
Tapas. I did it on Virtuosa. It's really good. It is. It's one of my favorites, actually, of the Mexican ones I've done at sea. So
good.
Yeah.
Okay, the second question. What's your most memorable, most outlandish, or most embarrassing cruise or port experience?
I'm sure I can't tell most of them on this podcast, but I mean, the serious moment, my longest lasting memory is around spending time with my parents on the ship. So that's the serious memory being one. But I think for me, and I forgot about this and I suddenly remembered it the other day. So I was on a Caribbean cruise a few years ago. I'm not going to name the line or what we were doing. I had popped up to a bar to go get a drink, and I was coming back to the room so I could enjoy the drink whilst getting ready for dinner at sunset. Bliss, wonderful, sounds amazing. So I walked up to the room, and it just so happens that there was a stateroom attendant there, and my hands were full. So he helpfully let me into the room. I walked straight into the middle of the room, and then I realised that wasn't my room. It was in someone else's cabin. And they were there as well. So they were just chilling out on the sofa. One was having a nap. I have to say it was slightly mortifying. But thankfully, it was people we knew.
Okay.
And, without saying it, it could have been a lot worse. So our balconies didn't join. So basically, I just kept walking. I didn't stop. I just kept going through. They were looking at me. I was like, nothing to see here. And I just walked straight back to my cabin. But yeah, that was, yeah. And yeah.
The oddball question, I say oddball, it just has nothing to do with cruising. So I know that you have a large following, and welcome to the Sparkx fans listening. Share one thing that my listeners and your fans don't know about Marcus.
I really struggle with thinking about this. So this is a totally random one out there. It has no bearing on anything. So I have a degree in genetics. It's not what I do for a living, but I have a random degree in genetics that I did many, many years ago. Strange, but true.
Well, after looking at your shelf with those marvelous Lego structures, I thought you might say something about that.
I mean, I already talked about it. That was the other option. I was going to, but it's almost, it literally is the elephant in the room.
Marcus, one last thing. We're going to put you to work. Tell us who is the winner this week of a copy of The Joy of Cruising or Cruising Interrupted.
Of course. So the winner this week is Shane Riley.
Great. So Shane is a member of the Joy of Cruising podcast group on Facebook. So I will catch up to Shane shortly after this airs. Marcus, thank you so much for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast. All the best to Sparkx. I know that you are constantly doing things in the cruise world. If you will be back, we will definitely like to have you back in the near future.
I would love to be back. And thank you so much for having me.
All right, Marcus, thank you and take care. And as they say, I will see you on the ocean.
Cheers.
Bye-bye now.
Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted can be ordered at the link on the joyofcruisingpodcast.com, each for $16.99 plus shipping. Order the soon-to-be-released The Joy of Cruising Again, also at thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com for $18.99. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. Again, the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast. Enter to win a copy of The Joy of Cruising or Cruising Interrupted while supplies last at thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or both to increase your chance to win. A winner will be announced on each show. Please leave us a review and tell a friend about us. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed the brief escape to the ocean. See you next week. Exciting news, passionate cruisers. The Joy of Cruising Again book was just released. Order the ebook at your favorite online retailer. The paperback can be ordered by copying the web address listed at the podcast website, www.thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. Don't forget to use the coupon code Joy of Cruising Podcast to get $4 off. We think you'll enjoy the new book as much as Paul enjoyed writing it, and we would love to hear your comments at the Joy of Cruising Again Facebook page or at the Joy of Cruising Instagram page. Thank you.